Okay, right. Good afternoon. Well, to start with, I'm going to give a couple of quotes. Firstly, Donald Atkinson, who, well, when I got this, was Canadian professor of Irish and Scottish studies, and he says, more than any other European nation, Ireland in the 19th and 20th centuries is characterized by emigration. And he's not alone, because Roy Foster, professor at Oxford, emigration is perhaps the fundamental fact of modern Irish history. So that's my starting point. In terms of numbers are always very questionable, but in 1890, it's thought that 40% of Irish-born men and women were living abroad. That's 3 million people. But I do stress I'm not just looking at Irish-born people, but I'm looking at their descendants as well. I'll come to the history part of it a bit later in the display, but anyway, in 2020, Ireland issued this stamp as part of a set about the Irish abroad, and specifically America. The date on there of 1988 caused a bit of confusion at the time, because that's the date of the artwork, which this is detail from, and what it's showing is a letter of 1912 from a daughter in America back home to her mother in Ireland. So it's marvelous for my topic, really.
Peter, sorry to interrupt, but
yeah.
You've gone back to the generic slideshow. Could you go back to from beginning? Because I don't know what happened there. It jumped back, I think.
Oh, right.
Yeah.
Oh. Oh, right.
Yes. So that's great.
Okay. Don't know what I did, but so on my second one, we're looking at two letters here, and these are ones who did not arrive at their recipient, because the intended recipient has, as you see, gone to America. Now, on the left-hand side, we've got one from attorneys at law in the States writing to Ireland. And am I being fanciful to think that they're sending to a lady, a younger lady, probably in Ireland, news of a legacy? One of her relatives is leaving her property or money or whatever. Am I being fanciful? But she's already gone, so she'll be able to collect it in person. I don't know. On the right-hand side, we've got a different case. Because here we've got a professional man, a qualified pharmacist. And you can just about read, I think, the embossing on the letter. It's coming from the Pharmaceutical Society of Ireland to him at Tandra G there. But he's not there. He's gone to America. Well, again, thinking about that, if you think that's in 1889, well, from late 1840s through the 1850s, we've got the Great Famine, the potato famine, in which 1 million people in Ireland died and 3 million emigrated. So where are his customers? He may well be qualified, but he's got to earn a living. Well, he's following them to America, because that's where he'll be able to make a living. As I say, I'm come to the history later. So when we're looking at people's descendants, you've got to be able to recognize them. How do we recognize them? They've got to keep their culture in one way. And so I'm starting by looking at ways that happens. There's a joint issue, special relationship, one could call it, between Ireland and America. A joint issue there, one immigration, one emigration. But what more Irish than the patron saint, St. Patrick? Now, the Vatican had formalized 17th of March as a day of religious observance and celebration in the 18th century, and it was first recorded in Boston in 1737, being celebrated, and the first New York parade was 1766. And it's interesting, that's a subject that Ireland itself chooses to commemorate with a stamp and booklet. The shamrock, another great symbol, and of course we've got a nice cork cancel of a shamrock, meter mark, and again they're two different. This shows another point. We've got at least two places called shamrock in America. How many there are, who knows? And also then a trademark using the shamrock again. What else? Oh, well, the leprechaun. What better to show? He's a supernatural being, usually possessor of great wealth, and this originates in household guardian spirits and underworld spirits. And being underground, they're involved in great fertility, agricultural fertility, and mineral wealth. And lucky the leprechaun is a symbol of the Boston Celtics. And again, that refers to the big Irish population in Boston. And when Mickey Mouse on his world tour wants to show Ireland, what better than leprechaun? And the shamrock gets in there as well. There you go. And now you and of course, choosing Disney, you might say, oh well, a Disney thing, but there's a double meaning to that, because Disney, Walt Disney, Irish ancestry, not quite straightforward Irish ancestry, because it comes from a Huguenot name. So the Huguenots getting religious persecution in France, and some of them emigrated, well, they emigrated lots of places, but they emigrated to Ireland. The name got anglicised to Disney, and hence Walt Disney. Again, this just shows, just as a side really, the way I tend to try and collect things. If I'm talking about someone in America, I'll have, or any country, I'll try and have a stamp of them from that country, and then I'll just get one other that I happen to like, because there'll be thousands of Disney, let alone, well, we'll come to Kennedy later on. Think how many million of those there are. So, but I'll just get one from another country, and that's good enough. So, so we're talking now about, we can recognise these people from Ireland by their names. Well, one of the classics will be Murphy, you know, obviously from Ireland. So here we've got a statesman there, Raymond Murphy. Had an important role in the Second World War. I think it was invasion of Italy he was particularly involved with. And also he's said to have acted as an advisor to at least 4 presidents. It was I think this must have been Wikipedia, but when it said at least, I thought it was quite an interesting one, but there you go. And we've got Eddie Murphy, poorly designed stamp, because you can hardly read the name, can you? I mean, I've enlarged it, but there you are. Now, when it comes to showbiz people of any sort, the journalists and fans and whatever are very hot on looking up their origins and ancestry and researching it and all the rest of it. And I think it's quite clear he has no Irish ancestry whatsoever. There's no question about that. So what about the name? This is the Irish connection. And this is that when slaves were emancipated, they didn't have clan or family names. Those were left in Africa. And for people of my generation, we remember in the 60s, if you can remember the 60s, Malcolm X made that clear. But what happened was, you can't have, you know, 500,000 people called Eddie wandering about the country. So they need a surname. And that was taken or given as the name of the previous owner. So one of his ancestors was owned by a slave owner called Murphy. Similar but different, Duke Ellington. We may well realise Duke is a nickname, Edward Kennedy Ellington. So Kennedy, we're going crazy again. Go back. There we go. Kennedy, mother's maiden name, and it was Duke's sister who explained that their maternal great-grandfather was the son of a slave, his father being the Irish slave owner called Kennedy. And the child might simply have been sold, but in this case, the father not only freed him before he legally had to, but set him up in business with a lumberyard and construction company, which he was very successful at. He was so successful, his children had good educations, and at least 2 of them became professional men, 1 doctor and 1 as a lawyer. And what do? Good middle-class people, you give their children education, including good music lessons. So Duke's mother, very musical, gave her son that enthusiasm, and the rest is 20th century music history. Another example, Ella Fitzgerald. Well, again, I said pop people do the research, and yes, her father was called Fitzgerald, and nobody has any idea where that name came from in his case. However, it's very significant in Irish history, because that goes back to the Norman people who came over with William the Conqueror, 1066 and all that. And as a reward, they were given land in England, or Britain, I should say. Yes, getting confusing, the Welsh Marchers particularly. And when they wanted more land, the Crown suggested, oh, well, actually, we don't want you causing trouble over here, but there's plenty of land in Ireland. And so in the 12th century, they went to Ireland. So probably another copy of that stamp belongs on my Irish history section, but there we go. Murphy again, Robert Cashman Murphy. He was this ornithologist, curator of birds, as I've said there, and he was the first to describe and discover, I suppose one would say, the Murphy's petrel, this seabird, which was then named after him. He identified it while he was on a naturalist on board one of the last whaling ships on a 2-year voyage to the Antarctic. And here he is there, R.C. Murphy, as you see, on the US brig Daisy, writing back to his mother. And it is his mother, I had to check this, but Mrs. T.D. Murphy, that is his mother, not his wife, he's writing back to there. But anyway, sticking with the Murphys, one of my favourite stamps, my very early days when I just scanned through the catalogue, looked through the whole of Gibbons to find every Murphy I could. And here was Laos celebrating the World Chess Champions. The first one was Paul Morphy, an American. And they made a design error and put Murphy. Now, I've been saying that at stamp clubs for 20 years. And about 6 weeks ago, I showed at Epsom. And at the interval, nice chap came up when I was having my cup of tea, and he said, oh, yes, I'd like your talk. He said, but I'm interested in chess. And Paul Morphy, do you know, I think that is an Irish name, you know. And I said, oh, well, thank you very much, sir. When I came home, I looked in my books, and perhaps I found a book that I didn't have before, but do you know, yes, it is true that in one particular little township in Ireland, they anglicised their Gaelic name to Morphy. So it looks as if Paul Morphy did have an Irish ancestry. So I need some more stamps of him now, straightforwardly. But there you are. That's why it's worth displaying. You learn more than they do, perhaps. And now I'm just going into a section of Irish names. Here we are, showing their derivation from the Gaelic. And it's usually the O, or sometimes O means son, I think, and Mac, if it's Mac, it's grandson. So here we are, we've got Dooley, Finn, and Flaherty, and Reardon. Well, the place called Reardon, how did it get its name? It's quite a strange one, really. Apparently, originally, it was a little settlement called Cap's Place, and the inhabitants heard that there's a railroad might be coming near them. So they dug a well and found, plenty of water there for the steam locos, and suggested that it ought to come near their settlement, which it did. And of course, it helped them prosper then. They could get their agricultural produce out, and people visited them, and there was a station, all this sort of thing. So in honor of that, they changed the name of the village to after the railroad civil engineer, Mr. C.F. Reardon. So very strange. There are 10 Dublins in the USA. I think I've got 5 there, and I may have some others. The Georgia is one gets mentioned on the first page of Finnegan's Wake by Joyce, but Finnegan's Wake, I don't think we'll go there if anybody has ever tried reading it. 5 Belfasts, I think I've got 3 of them there. You know, place names, it's quite another thing. We've gone back to, we've got him in the wrong order. Another name, and it's from its origin, Curwen. And again, this is one where it's quite nice to get a different philatelic element. So female for a member of Congress. I think that one's got out of order, hasn't it? But still, oh well. And now I think I'm getting, historical view. These numbers are already, you know, so 18th, 19th century, some 7 million go to America. You know, and 40 million trace part of their ancestry to Ireland. Well, you know, numbers are a bit vague, but we come to the looking at a history point of view. So the first era where we've got records at all, 17th century, but even then you see the number is between 50,000 and 100,000. You know, it's very vague, isn't it? And Lord Baltimore settled settlement Well, I've lost my notes here. Where am I? He wanted to create a refuge for persecuted Irish and English Catholics there. So that was his idea. And so the name Baltimore, we've got a straight line receiving house mark in Ireland of the place that they've come from. You know, that's where they got their name. And again, the coat of arms of the Baltimore family, and it shows how that then becomes the or is used as a state flag of Maryland. Next period, again, between 250,000 people between 1700 and 1776, and this time, the previous time, as Baltimore is an example, Catholics going Protestant, and at this period, most are Protestant, and many of them are Ulster Presbyterians, and they're going for financial reasons. They can get land there, and also to have their own political control, and they're not having to pay tithes to a church, although Protestant, the Church of Ireland, but it's not their church, is it? So again, going for freedom. And the example I'm giving here is the first president of Irish ancestry, Andrew Jackson, who I think, I hesitate to go into American history, but I think he's the first president of a sort of non-elite background. And again, from I haven't written it up, but I think that single use is because that's going to New Brunswick is a printed matter rate anyway. It's not a letter. It's a lumber price list, I think. This Scotch or Irish term. Well, these people at the time, they would quite quickly have thought of themselves as American. They wouldn't use the Scotch-Irish term, is used much later, and that's when the famine Irish, so second half of the 19th century arriving, who are very poor Catholic people coming in their millions, and to differentiate themselves, the earlier settlers start referring to themselves or being referred to as Scotch-Irish. So they largely Presbyterian or Protestant at any rate, and it's not till then, after President Kennedy makes being Irish at all a more acceptable thing, that suddenly people from this background start saying, oh, well, we're Irish Americans as well, because it's suddenly a positive thing. Here's examples. Well, not surprising, the father of American Presbyterianism was ordained in Ireland. And the other example, and there are plenty more, but I'm just choosing, is Morse. Morse code fame. Again, my thing of using one American stamp and one from somewhere else, and it does give the opportunity for this British set where they the most famous thing in May Day would be SOS ... .. etc. As we all remember from our Cub Scouts, don't we, or Girl Guides? We did a bit of Morse code, and they actually use the perforations, the dots and dashes in the perforations, which you can see there, which is again a nice one, really, because how often do you get a chance to use perforations in your as part of your theme? War of Independence, the Irish were involved with. Sullivan there capturing Fort William and Mary, which I think was the first major engagement of the War of Independence, and surrender at the Battle of Saratoga, when General Fraser was killed by sharpshooter Timothy Murphy, whose parents were from Donegal. Father of the American Navy, John Barry, who was the commander of the Lexington, the first purpose-built warship of the Revolution, and he's been commemorated by both countries, Ireland and US, of course. Declaration of Independence, 3 of the signatures are Irish born, so I'm saying there, others of Irish descent, and the printer, because the copies were rush printed once it was signed, and he was from Northern Ireland. There was one Catholic signed, Charles Carroll, piece of postal stationery for him, and his cousin involved in the Catholic Church in the US. The architect of the White House, James Hoban, Irish born, And clearly I was going to say designer, but the person who painted the portrait there that was used on the stamp actually must have been present at Stamper 81 signing these presentation packs. I wasn't there. I got this years afterwards. In fact, it wasn't even, it was just in a mixed lot, undescribed. So I think I was very lucky to get that, really. And although he probably signed thousands or hundreds anyway. An oddity of the joint issue, because between designing it and preparing it, the inland postage rate in the US went up from 18 cents to 20 cents. And initially they were only, why do we want 18 cent stamp? Well, they didn't really, but what had happened was several copies had already been given as presentations to various officials. And so it was suddenly at the last minute realized that, oh dear, we'll have a stamp that's incredibly valuable because only a few have been printed. So they suddenly at the last minute printed a vast number of the 18-cent stamps, which were now obsolete for real postage, but it meant that there wasn't a rarity. So that's a slightly quirky issue there. And then I said, potato famine, late 1840s, and here that it doesn't reproduce very well, really, because the picture on the Irish stamp comes from the Illustrated London News. So these are just engraved pictures in black and white, and they are findable. For another one in the set, I have managed to get one that's been cut from the Illustrated London News. That one I haven't managed to get yet, but anyway. And then on the right there, we're seeing that huge numbers of immigrants, and they set up their own or emigrant society, and this was particularly so that money could be transferred back to Ireland through a trustworthy organization. And there's a you can see the annotation on the top there that Reverend so-and-so, it's his third remittance of, I'm not quite sure whether that's £200 or $200 from what they've written, but anyway, he's clearly remitting back money to, and I think it's to another reverend person. So whether they're doing this for people in their parish so that they're trustworthy as well or not, I don't know, but that's one. It's potentially researchable because the names are there, but I've got many things where I say that. Irish involved in the Civil War, particularly on the Union side. We've got the shamrock there, symbolizing again, as I said, you know, this is where we recognize these things. A couple more of these patriotic envelopes. As you can see, very Irish names on the right there, the Sons of Erin. Marvelous one, that. I mean, I suppose you were supposed to stick your stamp on there and write the address on it, I don't know. And also the other one with the Union flag and the Irish flag. Oh, and an actual, and this is an eBay find, I think, when we were just looking through randomly, an actual Irishman signing up there, James Murphy, 19-year-old plumber, and he gets $300 bounty. That's probably quite a lot in 1864. There was a set of stamps and postal stationery cards for the first famous newspaper cartoons. And it's interesting that out of the set, 2 of them involved Irish characters. The one is clearly Hogan's Alley, which I didn't know, but it's starring the Yellow Kid, and the Yellow Kid was an Irish immigrant. So he's, it's double-edged, this, isn't it, really? But I think perhaps one thing we can take from it is that everybody who's reading the newspapers would know about the sheer numbers of Irish people in their population now. So whether they think looking at it positively or negatively is another matter, really, but it's worth putting your cartoon on that assumption that everybody knows about the Irish. And I want, again, a slight oddity is to get a rapper band at the bottom there, again, which is unusual to be able to do. And that's the other one, so-called Bringing Up Father. Otherwise, the characters were Maggie and Jiggs. And this is really, there's an element of mocking those Irish who are making money, though. They're making money and they can afford all the latest fashions and using a telephone. And although it's making fun of them, it is showing that some of the Irish are by this time making a success in the new life there. Obviously, big thing for any outside group and immigrants is sport or show business. And in boxing, the Irish were quite dominant, really, and in the late 19th century. Again, we could do other things on that. So we've got Jack Dempsey there. The one, the middle one is quite interesting in a way, because Slanya, the well-known engraver, he was a great boxing fan, and he did his own set of world champions. It's a set of 23, because of whatever date he did it, there'd been 23 world champions. And so that's a nice and marvelous engravings, of course, being his. And again, on the right-hand side, we've got an artwork, George Bellows, not Irish at all or whatever, but Dempsey. Now, with Bellows, when he was commemorated by an American stamp on the left there, as just part of the movement, the Ashcan painters. Well, this is a term, like Impressionists really, as an insult, because like the Impressionists, these artists didn't paint historical scenes or academy paintings, they painted real life. And of course, insulting, it was said, oh, you're down the back alley painting Ashcans. And of course, they do turn that into a positive thing that, yes, we'll call ourselves that then. So, but of course, the stamp itself, you know, you say, oh, it doesn't have any Irish connection at all. He's not Irish, the boxers aren't Irish, whatever. But it's the title, and that's a stag at Sharkey's. And that is when the box, to have a boxing match, it had to be at an official gym. And, but of course, not much of a restriction, because what happens? Well, the gyms say, oh, you can have a day's membership to go in and watch the fight. So that's, and this gym was owned by Sailor Tom Sharkey, born Ireland, born Dundalk, Ireland, and he'd been a big name in boxing in the late 19th century. Baseball, the Irish very dominant in baseball in the late 19th century, and thinking about the timing, if you think the famine refugees are coming over 1850s, whatever, 1850-ish, and baseball really takes off in the 1860s. So the children of these famine refugees, it's just the time they're growing up. So they take up the sport, it's a way to get success, and they're very dominant in baseball. Now, in this Casey at the bat, although it's the name Casey, it was widely known that it was actually being written about Mike King Kelly, who was a pioneer in baseball in various ways. It's not my sport, so I don't know, but it certainly with the techniques. He was a player, manager. He was the first player autobiography, signing autographs, all this sort of thing. And clearly the pop hit Kelly Slide was about him. And when we say a pop hit, it was a cylinder. What's my next thing? Oh, I'm into the arts now. 19th century, still live, William Hartnett, born in Ireland, Rose O'Neill, most popular cartoons before Mickey Mouse, and the Cupid doll there were actually dolls produced. And so it's thought this was the first cartoon character or film character with tie-ins. Nowadays, the first thing you're thinking about is all the marketing and the toys and whatever, but she was the first to do that, and so very successful. Pioneers of photography, Timothy Sullivan. I think that's Civil War. I think he did in the West, far West and Civil War he was known for. Well, that was a stamp where, for me, at least at Stamp-Ace, I had to buy the whole sheet of 20 or 30 or whatever it was, tear them all up, take out the one I wanted. And when you do that, you've got all the others, which are usually just given away, really. But this one, I did want. Hands and Thimble. For those who collect precious metals, that is a silver thimble, so you'll want that one. Now, Alfred Stieglitz, not Irish at all, don't be silly. Mid-Europe, Hungarian, or I don't know, don't care. So why are we showing it? Well, it's got to be the hands, hasn't it? Who do they belong to? Well, they belong to his muse, later wife, Georgia O'Keeffe, whose father was from Ireland. Now, when the US commemorated her, they used her flower paintings, which was her second big subject. But the first subject she did was these skyscraper buildings, etc., which again appeared in this Togo set. There was a third sort of paintings which were landscapes of New Mexico, which she did in her 80s and 90s, I think, when she moved there. But I haven't managed to find any of those. So if anybody's into art on stamps and can tell me there is one, I'll be very grateful. Literature and perhaps films. Margaret Mitchell, it was her mother who was Catholic, Irish Catholic background. And of course, if you're going to only write one novel, let's make it a good one, a big one. So Gone with the Wind was the novel, then the film. And just, you can see from the characters, Scarlett O'Hara, and the estate is, her father's estate is called Tara. Well, Tara was in I was going to say mythology, that's not quite true, but in legend, no, that's not quite true either, because I think it was true, but it was in the reputation was the site of the High Kings of Ireland, had a hall there or castle there or whatever. That's a place where there were two different receiving house marks there, one in a circle and one straight line, which is and still on literature. Marianne Moore did have some remote Irish ancestry, but she rather overemphasized it because she was very inspired by W.E. Yeats and the Celtic Revival. And on the right there, we've got Rachel Carson, who is perhaps thought of as she was ahead of her time, perhaps the mother of the environmental movement. The book Silent Spring, which was a protest against the indiscriminate use of DDT. And I think she was awarded the Presidential Medal of Honor in a posthumous sense by Jimmy Carter, I think. I'm not absolutely, it's long after her death, really. Movies, James Cagney, perhaps thought of in Britain for his gangster roles, but really he was leading man and song and dance man, and he played the part of George Cohen, who was Irish American song and dance man. So we've got Irish American playing Irish American, which I quite liked, really. Grace Kelly, again, I could have put several other people in showbiz and film there, but I like the fact that the symbol of the Irish Library set up in her memory there on the stamp and postmark using the shamrock symbol again. And then, of course, President Kennedy, who was the first president of famine Irish background, both on the maternal and paternal side. So his grandfathers and Fitzgerald and Kennedy were both members of the Democrats' political machine, Irish political machine in Boston, really, and the two families coming together. And again, it's my thing of using an American stamp and a stamp from somewhere else. And why I've chosen those particular ones is because they show, as they say, Fitzgerald in full, which many don't. So that's why I looked for those. And of course, famously, Kennedy visited Ireland, and I'm quite pleased to get this programme for his visit. And I've just photocopied the first page. I mean, it is simply just a listing of all the timings through the whole visit, including his visit to his home territory. And the one, it just, well, perhaps it's me, it tickled me, is down at the bottom there where, oh, we're going down to 8:13 p.m. and the communal ceremonial drive starts at 8:26. So it really is to the minute, well, I'm sure the Secret Service people kept them up to that as well. And then when his sister Kate was ambassador to Ireland in 1993-98, she signed this aerogram there, and provenance in collecting terms. Oh, we always want provenance, don't we, really? Because otherwise you might think I'd scrawled that on there, but no, I've actually got the provenance because it was done for Nora Wright, who I did, and it was only last night, really, because I've been thinking, I knew she, as you can see from that at the end there, she had a display called It's an Irish World, And which is why when I started mine, I did not use that title because she was still doing it. I never saw it. I don't know what happened to it. Obviously, well, it all got split up, didn't it? Because I got that one item. And how serious it was, I don't know. But she was a very serious Irish philatelist. She identifying perfins, the censor marks of the Second World War, and then things of the Easter Rising and the Troubles period. She was pioneer collector on those. And I have said, last night, I realized, having never seen it, I thought, oh, well, I never, but I did, I was in her company anyway, once. So I met her and was introduced to her once, long time ago, at a dinner for Bill Kane's 90th birthday, I think. I was a brand new secretary of the Irish Circle, and the chap who I was taking over from, or he wanted me to take over, he was going over. So I said, oh, you come along with us, I'll introduce you all. So I met Nora Wright, and I met David Feldman of Feldman Auctioneers. So, but it was a long, long time ago. But anyway, so that's my provenance for the other one. So, and also, well, I don't know about an inspiration, but it's a retrospective inspiration for an Irish World collection. And finally, there are places called Ireland in the US. I think there's about 5, and the manuscript one, unless anybody can decipher that squiggle, is that a state, that squiggle, or is it just saying September the 11th? But anyway, on places called Ireland in the United States, that's where I'll finish my Ireland in America for you.